For those who have no idea what we're talking about, can you break down what exactly is microdosing and what are you microdosing on?
I work primarily with mushrooms, but you can microdose a lot of substances, and it's taking a sub-perceptual dose. So it's a dose that's smaller than what your mind can really perceive, meaning you won't really feel it. You can go to work, you can interact with your kids. No one should be like, what's happening with mom? And you can drive, you can exercise. So it's just kind of working under the surface, and it's not working for you. You still have to show up and do the work and interact with it. So it requires like a lot of inquisition, like getting very curious, having some quiet time, some introspection. Journaling is hugely helpful. So you are showing up and working with it, but it's not a dose that's going to take you out of your coherent state.
I don't know about you, but I am a big fan of biohacking. And that is why I am so excited about today's conversation with the Biohacking Babes, Lauren and Renee. This dynamic duo are sisters who come from a family where their dad was a biohacking pioneer in holistic dentistry. Lauren, a corrective exercise specialist, functional health coach, and Broadway performer, alongside Renee, who's a certified nutritional consultant and holistic lifestyle coach with a master's degree in nutrition, both share their passion for wellness through biohacking. Listen in as one of them confesses to their journey with chronic fatigue and the other confesses to suffering from chronic pain. You are going to learn simple hacks to optimize your health and practical strategies to incorporate in your daily life. So whether you're new to biohacking or looking to deepen your knowledge, this conversation will empower and inspire you to take charge of your wellness journey today. It's time for confession. Thank you so much for both coming on and choosing to share a health confession with us today. So I'm not sure who wants to go first, Lauren or Renee, but what is your health confession?
Oh my goodness, right on the spot. Usually I go first because I'm older, but I'm like, ooh, I got really shy, but I'm already jabbing. So I'll share mine. I have pain. I have back pain that I'm dealing with. Yeah, and I don't always like come out and share that one, but it's been a chronic struggle that I'm a little bit grateful for because it's helped me to expand my knowledge and understanding and hopefully help other people. But yeah, that's a struggle.
Is it chronic back pain? Like, is it something that happened from an accident, or is it just a flare-up that happened and now it's just become chronic and it sort of doesn't disappear?
So I had an injury. I grew up as a dancer, performed as a dancer, professional dancer for a long time, and I had an injury in a show and was just managed pretty well for a long time. But then when I stopped dancing, suddenly my body was like, now we're going to give you all pain. And so I've just been dealing with it a little bit more in the last few years, and it kind of flares, and it's actually very well managed when I lift really heavy weights, which is maybe something we could talk about today. But most people, when they have pain, they're like, oh, I shouldn't work out. But I feel worse if I am not lifting heavy weight, which is interesting. But I think there's some emotional ties in there. Of course, there's other ties to systemic health and the organs, and I've learned a lot about it. But yeah, it's from an injury from dancing.
Definitely want to talk to you more about that emotional side. I've seen you mention this before, but how has it impacted your life? Same with me. I've got a background in gymnastics and had a lot of injuries. Ended up with 30s, and then by the 30s, I had more when I stopped doing so much movement. So I'm interested, but how else has that chronic pain impacted your life?
Well, for anyone that's been in pain, you know how much it really takes over your mental and emotional health. Like, it just floods your kind of brain space, right? It's hard to think about anything else or focus on anything else when there's pain. That really becomes the focus. And so it's ultimately just really distracting a lot of days. And I've had to really just kind of observe my relationship with pain, because I used to be quite conservative, like, oh, pain meant like you need to avoid stuff. But pain is really just communication. So I'm kind of trying to lean in more to the signals and what it's trying to share with me, rather than say like, oh, I need to like not move my body, which I think a lot of people do. Yeah. So mostly I would just say it's just annoying and distracting a lot of days, where it's like I can't really focus on what I would prefer to focus on because I'm thinking about pain, just a lot of brain space.
I can't wait to talk to you more about what exactly you've done to manage that chronic pain. But Renee, we're going to go with you now. What is your health confession?
Yeah. So this wasn't what I had planned to share, but it's coming up now, so I'm just going to go for it. I've had a really long journey with chronic fatigue, and I thought I had solved it. I thought I had all the answers. I had energy again. I felt great. And I don't know, in the last 2 years, it started creeping back. And it's forced me to be honest about certain things and to look at different aspects that I hadn't looked at before. And it's been tough because it's like, thought I had this all figured out. But I don't. So fatigue, it's an annoying symptom. Anyone that has dealt with chronic fatigue, it sucks.
Yeah, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome about 2 years ago, and I'm very much both of what you both shared I very much resonate with. Had chronic fatigue on and off. I've had multiple serious infections when I was a kid, so I was always a kid that sort of went up and down with this chronic fatigue. And it's, as you said, it can become debilitating. It can feel really frustrating because you don't know what to do from that point. So, how have you managed with, as you said, you're not sure, you don't have it figured out yet, but what are the things that you're doing in your life right now to help manage that fatigue?
To back up a little bit, so I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome in 2008. So it was a long time ago. And then I would say by 2014, I was feeling amazing. Like I said, I solved all the problems. And at that point, I was doing a lot of the same stuff I'm still doing today that I found has worked, which is prioritizing sleep, managing stress, really focusing on good blood sugar control with my diet, eating kind of a paleo-ish diet seems to work well for me, the right exercise for me. I'm doing all those things, but it's somehow in the last 2 years, doing all those things is not enough. So something new that I'm exploring, just to be totally open and honest, is I have 2 titanium dental implants in my mouth. And we're hearing more and more about this being a problem for several reasons. One, having metal in our mouth could be acting as an antenna for all the EMFs around us. So like as an electrical system, that could be causing issues. It's also a foreign material in my body. So my body could be having an immune reaction saying this is not self and making the immune system work harder. I am strongly looking into getting them out in the fall, which is not going to be a fun surgery. I have been thinking about it for many years and I'm like, don't want to do it because it's going to be pretty painful. The recovery is going to be tough, but I think I'm to that point where I'm like, I need to flip over every rock. And that's, I think, the next rock to flip.
I'm assuming then, did both of you with biohacking, if we move into the biohacking space now, I'm assuming both of you stumbled or might have come across or actually intentionally went into biohacking, I'm guessing because of potentially these chronic fatigue, pain and that sort of thing. So for those who might not be familiar with the term biohacking, they're like, what are they talking about? Can you explain what it is and why would someone want to learn to biohack their health?
Biohacking has so many definitions. I suppose to us, it just means optimizing our own genetic potential. So it's recognizing that there's no one size fits all. We are all bio individuals. And so the choices, the inputs, the lifestyle that we choose really has to be specific to our own physiology and needs. And we got into biohacking because of our dad, who's a biological dentist, and he was biohacking before it was called biohacking in the early 90s. When we were kids, he was using low-level laser, which we now know of as red light therapy. We had PEMF mats in our living room, and now they're all the rage. And so we were really introduced to this idea that we could use technology, harness technologies to optimize our healing potential. Because we believe that our body has its own natural healing abilities. And we live in a modern, toxic, stressful world. And so there's a lot of interferences there. One of which is what Renee introduced, the idea of having something that's non-compatible or foreign inside your body, like a titanium implant. So we have to really be aware of those things. But then we could use technology to kind of support the nervous system and support our cells and support our mitochondria. So we have a better capacity for this healing. So if biohacking is new to you, one kind of category in biohacking is using the technology, but another big piece is using the curiosity and self-experimentation to figure out what is right for our personal bodies. There's a component of like free ancestral hacks. So it's like just getting back to nature, utilizing the sun and grounding and good circadian rhythm practices. There's a lot of offshoots here, but the short answer is our dad introduced this to us at a very early age. And then, yes, our own challenges with health kind of brought us back around to it. It was like, wait, we can't just be doing what everyone's doing or what people are recommending in the health magazines, which is what I grew up with. I was always buying the magazines and scrolling through, like, what's the diet of the day? So yeah, we owe a lot to him. And we learned curiosity first and foremost, like just getting curious of other ways that we could reach our potential.
You basically grew up with biohacking from the sounds of it. He said he had devices, red light therapy before it was called red light therapy and those sorts of things. So it's amazing because you would have had an advantage to be more open-minded, as you said, and curious to exploring and bringing things into your life. So what are the biggest biohacks that you've both found individually for chronic pain and fatigue. What's been sort of the top 3 that you have found that have worked personally for those specific issues for each of you individually?
Yeah, let's see. I think I have to put infrared sauna in the top 3. Maybe it's not the top 3 for everyone, but for me, I feel like a new human when I get out of there. I feel like energized, my brain feels clear, my mood is boosted. And I just think the health benefits are so endless. Right? We see that with sauna research, cardiovascular health, immune health, detox, weight loss, brain function, immune function. Like you can't fight against that research. It's pretty profound. So that's been really great for me just to support, especially detoxification. Also the Brain Tap device. Are you familiar with the Brain Tap?
Yes, please share. I'm really interested in this.
Yeah. So I've had mine for about 5 years and I honestly use it almost every single day, which I can't say of many biohacks. I even bring it when I travel in my suitcase. So it looks like just normal headphones, kind of like Lauren's wearing. And then it has an eyepiece that goes over. So it's using light and sound. And you can put your brain into different states. So you can do, for example, like alpha, beta, theta, delta, gamma. So depending on what you are trying to achieve, like I just did a theta session before I jumped on here because I wanted to feel calm and focused for the podcast versus I might do delta before bed because I'm getting my brain ready for sleep. So you can do it, any time of day and change which track you're doing. But for me, someone who was very sympathetic driven, very chronically stressed and burned out, and that was the start of my journey, I had to learn ways to retrain my autonomic nervous system, how to get into a parasympathetic state more often. And I have found many tools that have been great, but for, I would say, like price, ease of use, and size, the Brain Tap has been number 1 for that. I think everyone needs one. I'm like, I know I don't work for the company. And I'm just like, everyone in the world, I think, needs at least some device like a Brain Tap.
I looked at the Brain Tap. So I had an accident. The same thing with background in, obviously I had chronic illnesses. I had some trauma that happened, another serious accident that happened actually beginning of this year. And I was looking at potentially different devices and I'd seen the Brain Tap and I was like, oh, does this actually work? I was a bit skeptical. I wasn't sure. So I'm glad you brought it up because it's something that I'm actually really going to look into now for that. As you said, moving your brain into different states and different brain waves, I think can be really helpful. And I guess it's a biohack in terms of getting your body to move in sympathetic, parasympathetic, into those different states as well. So, that's a really interesting one.
Yeah. I'm glad you were looking at that.
They've done some really cool research kind of comparing it to all the work that monks do in meditation, which just takes an exorbitant amount of time and training and just so much patience. That's the word, that the average person isn't going to do. So like it truly is a biohack because it's creating efficiency in this practice where we can really get to that state so much quicker without dedicating our life to being a monk and meditating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, today is a great example. I lay down to do a 15 or 20 minute theta session and I have a lot going on right now and my brain is just going. It was just, I just couldn't turn my brain off. But with that technology, I still got up and felt better. So it was like, even though my mind didn't want to totally give in, the technology still supported my body. Like I came up and I was like, okay, I feel like more energized. I feel more mental clarity. So it's okay. So I think for a lot of people that have the busy mind, it could be a great biohack. Yeah.
What have you done for chronic pain that's been a biohack?
So many things. Okay, well, if we step back and look at what pain is, sometimes it could be something really localized, like it's structural or muscular, and that is definitely worth observing, assessing, kind of having a better understanding of your own mechanics. But we know like pain isn't solely just like in our structures and our tissues. Pain is a signal from the brain that is communicating either a threat or it's trying to tell you to do something different. And so I feel like for me, my background as a dancer, Renee and I both grew up dancing and then I became a personal trainer. So I was very like movement exercise focused and I have those tools. And so I'm constantly like observing symmetry in my body and activating muscles and doing corrective exercise, which is very valuable and essential. but it's only a part of the puzzle. If we look at the brain kind of signaling this threat, we have to look at all of the emotional components as well. We have to look at our nervous system. We have to look at patterns. We have to look at how are we recovering. Of course, that's a whole other category, but just to offer sort of a balance to what Renee introduced in terms of technology devices, I think non-device technologies, we're really addressing mindset and psychology. Something like using psychedelics could be an amazing way to look at narratives and mindsets and belief systems. I think when it comes to healing with chronic illness, there's usually a huge mindset component. And people that are ill, it's if we can do all these biohacks and do all the protocols and take all the supplements, but if we're not addressing the narrative that's kind of running the show, we're only going to get so far. And so I think psychedelics is an option. I wouldn't say it's right for everybody, but it can be a real way to kind of step outside of our usual routine, kind of dissolve the walls and the boundaries around us, dissolve those belief systems, and create new neural pathways where there are other possibilities. A lot of people that are stuck in chronic illnesses, and this isn't everyone, but you'll notice sometimes people are just chronically have new issues. It's how could one person just have the worst luck in the world? Yeah, I mean, and sometimes there is something we're missing. It could be environmental, right? And that's come back to the oral health or anything that's foreign in your body, or it could be something in your environment you're being exposed to daily. We got to look at all of that. But once we've accounted for all those things and you're still having issues, what is that narrative underneath? Do you not believe that you should be well? Is there trauma that has taught you that anything outside of trauma is not safe? It sounds kind of crazy that our human species wants to just be safe and to survive. But if trauma is the way that you grew up and that's all that you know, trauma actually is safety to some people. So yeah, I think it deserves looking at the narratives that are running the show, and psychedelics can be a really great way to kind of break beyond that, because sometimes it's not within our scope. It's we just can't figure it out. We're running into the wall. We're trying to do different things, but we have the same outcome. And so psychedelics really offer this beautiful opportunity to observe and kind of go deeper. And asking the question why is always a great way in, because then with more information, we have more opportunities. So yeah, that's a non-device technology would be to look at the psychological side using psychedelics.
I want to dive deeper with you on the psychedelics. So if I go with my own stories, I had a background, I had a really severe infectious disease. I was the 7th case in the world at the time, and I was 9 years old. And the bacteria developed into a tumor on my spinal cord. So I was in a hospital for a good year and a half, central line to the heart. It took them a long time to figure out what it was. Smashed my immune system with 7 different antibiotics, all these different drugs. And basically immune system had just been flatlined. I'd seen you speak about where you were you can do all the cold plunges, the breath work, the saunas, all the things. And if you don't address the emotional health, it might be that missing key. Myself with trauma, I went and looked at psychedelics. I was okay, I'm going to go down that path. For me, I went and did all of the heavy, the big ceremonies and the things like that. So when you're talking about psychedelics, are you talking about in a setting in Peru or microdosing, or what kind of context are you talking about psychedelics in?
Yeah, well, there's so many different possibilities here. I primarily work with microdosing with clients. So that would be a sub-perceptual dose, something you can take daily with a protocol that's not going to interrupt your day-to-day responsibilities. That's not right for everyone. Some people need a bigger journey, like an ayahuasca or a mushroom hero's journey. So it kind of depends on the situation and the preferences and the lifestyle and how deep you want to go. But yeah, I primarily work with microdosing because people are often coming with these health challenges. And so it's we're talking about nutrition and exercise and sleep, and we're getting kind of blocked. And this can be just an easy, accessible, low-hanging fruit, really. I mean, there's a lot of context around that, around psychedelics, because it's largely still illegal here in the US. But it is somewhat of a non-threatening ad where we can continue the work. And then, yeah, if a larger journey is interesting to you and it's the right fit, we can certainly entertain that. So there's benefits on both sides, really. It just depends on the person.
For those who have no idea what we're talking about, can you break down what exactly is microdosing and what are you microdosing on?
I work primarily with mushrooms, but you can microdose a lot of substances, and it's taking a sub-perceptual dose. So it's a dose that's smaller than what your mind can really perceive, meaning you won't really feel it. You can go to work, you can interact with your kids. No one should be like, what's happening with mom? And you can drive, you can exercise. So it's just kind of working under the surface, and it's not working for you. You still have to show up and do the work and interact with it. So it requires like a lot of inquisition, like getting very curious, having some quiet time, some introspection. Journaling is hugely helpful. So you are showing up and working with it, but it's not a dose that's going to take you out of your coherent state. If that makes sense.
I want to go back to the emotional health side of things. So as I said, I've heard Lauren, you mentioned, all of the biohacking things that you can do. And if you're not addressing the emotional health, that can be an issue. And then I want to ask you, Renee, would you say potentially that some of the chronic fatigue syndrome might have an emotional component to it as well?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah, that's a big can of worms, potentially. I mean, we're sisters, so I'll just say, as kids, this is interesting to bring up and maybe has always felt a little uncomfortable, but as kids, our parents both worked a lot. So we were home without them a lot. I had a lot of babysitters. And so I've always suspected like this sort of like low level feeling of abandonment, perhaps. I think that's one thing. Like there could be just and we both had brilliant, like beautiful, colorful childhoods. So it's so interesting to compare to more visible trauma. But I think there's like these low level kind of micro traumas that you could experience as a child. And until it's really been talked about and brought to the surface, it can live in the body. So I'll let Renee speak, but I think like it could be like really tiny things that sit in the body. And if they're not addressed, they can continue to express until you deal with it.
Yeah, I'm very open-minded to that. I could be missing something there, because certainly if your body is always dealing with that, you would think like that could be draining your energy. And through some psychedelic work, also through a friend of ours, Raj, who has created this kind of like emotional mapping thing where you don't need psychedelics. I went through his program, and you go like 7-year intervals just back in time and see like what could be going on. And I got to 0 to 7 years old and I just started crying. I was like, what is happening here? And we kind of actually, working with the coach, tied it back to this feeling of abandonment. And I was like, what? I had an amazing childhood. I don't know what you're talking about. And then I'm like, oh yeah, we had a lot of babysitters. Maybe that was like harder on me at that age than I realized. And so I have personally played with psychedelics in larger quantities. I've also microdosed. It's been very eye-opening, lots of lessons. Again, the integration is so important. I'm glad that you brought that up. I'm open to anything. I'm like, if I'm missing something, like, show me.
Emotions, right? My journey started, I'd say about 6-7 years ago, when I was introduced to that kind of psychedelic world and a little bit of the biohacking world. And I was doing it, and I started to realize how much was sitting under the surface in terms of the emotional side, and how much, as you said, stuck emotions, nervous system dysregulation, what it actually can really do and break down the body. And then that's why I ended up looking at biohacking even a little bit more. Because I was, as you said, the way that for me personally see biohacking is it's using these like little techniques and tools, especially when you're really busy, because everyone's complaint is usually, I don't have time to do that. And I'm like, well, biohacking, it kind of uses little shortcuts to try and still optimize your health, but you can integrate them still in a way where you're able to continue your daily functioning in life. It doesn't take up copious amounts of time, from my understanding. Now, I'm not an expert like both of you, but is that sort of how you would approach biohacking for yourself personally?
I think that's ideal, but there's a lot of toys in the space. Like there's sort of endless things you can buy and play with. So we always joke, it's like, oh yeah, if I had all the time in the world, I would spend all day playing with all the toys of biohacking. But that's not really the goal behind us. It is trying to create efficiency. And so we do think it's important to address the bio-individuality, like what's really going to move the needle for you, what really resonates with you. Like for Renee, she's like, brain tap. Can't live without the brain tap, So you have to figure out what that is for you. And that's a big challenge, with our audience. Sometimes they're like, oh gosh, Lauren and Renee are talking about another device that I have to get. It's like, no, we don't need all the things. We're introducing you to a wide scope so that you can do the investigation yourself, and then like pick the one that's really meaningful for you, because this should free up your day. That's like one of our goals, is to get out of our own way and have more time so we can enjoy our life and be with our loved ones, and not be like biohacking in a closet alone. It's not the goal.
For sure.
Given the nature of biohacking, it's like, exploring this frontier of health innovations, which can be obviously a little bit outside mainstream medical world typically. So how does someone safely navigate biohacking? or which protocols can they and can't they do? Like we've seen on social media before, you might see someone's like, get a nice bath or go do this, go do that. And then the person might find that they don't feel so great. So how do they like navigate this world of what they can start to do if they're interested, but they're not sure where to get the right information or what the right sort of protocols and things that they can do to implement in their life are?
It's a big question. I think one, if you're just getting started, anything that seems like nature has provided it for us, safe to start with. Grounding, sunshine, walking, being in nature, like those are all I count them as biohacks. Like you're not going to do harm with something that nature is naturally providing. Good place to start. Second, I would say find someone that you really trust. Like for me, for a long time, like Ben Greenfield was my go-to. He's still somewhat my go-to. I resonated with him. I trusted him. I knew he was doing the research. I knew he was testing things out. Find someone like that where you can connect and really learn and follow from them. Third, listen to your intuition if you can. I know that's hard for a lot of people, but if there is a new biohack and your stomach is flipping about it, that's just an example, but that's probably a sign that it's not ideal for you. You're not really going to do much harm unless you're like injecting stem cells in your arm at home or, or putting magnets under your skin. I mean, if you're doing like extreme quote unquote biohacks, yeah, I would be more careful, but anything you're injecting, I would say, make sure you're working with a practitioner. But other than that, I think, a lot of the stuff, I think you can do too much harm.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there. Like I would be skeptical about supplements. Skeptical doesn't mean like, oh, that can't possibly be good for me. Have a healthy level of skepticism while also being open-minded. I think there's still a lot we don't know, and biohackers are very quick to be like, here, take this cool new thing without having like a lot of long-term research. And so then just like we're kind of playing pharmaceutical whack-a-mole, right? Doctors are like, take this. Now you have another problem, take this. It's kind of happening with supplements now to a certain degree. Yeah, as Renee said, find someone that you trust and just remain a little skeptical and do your research definitely before you take it. That's like a little bit of a fault I see in the biohacking world is biohackers are like, sure, give it to me. I'll take it. I'll be the guinea pig. Which like someone has to, I suppose. Yeah. We're doing the experiment so that we can share it with you. But in terms of devices, I don't think there's a lot that you can really like overdose on. Like something like PEMF, maybe there's diminishing returns, but it's hard to overdo that.
Red light therapy.
Cold plunging, red light therapy, diminishing returns. I mean, there is some research with red light therapy. If you do too much, we are flipping like the redox reaction. So yeah, I mean, be reasonable with it. Trust your intuition. The other rule that Renee introduced. Cold plunging, we can certainly overdo, but I feel like most people don't like it. So a lot of people are not going to overdo it. But I have seen women that are definitely overdoing it for sure. So like if you follow those rules that Renee introduced, listen to your intuition, have someone that you trust. So hopefully at least between those two rules, if your intuition's not so clear, but at least you have someone that you trust, hopefully they can be kind of a sounding board and like call you out if you are doing it too much as an example.
Who would be the go-to biohackers then that you personally follow or that you look up to, that you trust? You've mentioned Ben Greenfield. Is there anyone else that you're like, no, this is someone that I really highly respect and really trust the process and what they're doing in the biohacking space? Who else could you recommend?
Yeah. Dr. Amy Killen. I would put her up there on the list. She is a doctor. That's like her saying. She does a lot in the regenerative medicine space, but she's a big biohacker and she is always looking to educate people. And she's really big on research. She won't just try something once and be like, oh, it worked and recommend it. Like she wants to see the science. I look to her for a female voice. I think someone else in the biohacking space, Molly Eastman, for when it comes to sleep. If I have any question about sleep, tech, gadgets, testing, supplements, she is my go-to. And like 99% of the time, she's like, oh, already researched it, already tried it. Here's the pros and cons. I'm like, thank you. You just saved me hours of my life. And Ben Greenfield, like I said before, I would say those probably are like my top go-tos. Yeah.
Yeah. I really love Ben. He just like continues to surprise us because he really will try everything. And he is no shame about being 1,000% honest about fails and wins. And of course, he's not a female, so we can't follow his lead on hormonal stuff. But just his thought process around how he digests information, sets up experiments, and he really has evolved to put spirituality and like emotional health at the top, which I think you can't overlook that, right? We started talking about that before. We can't just do the biohacks without looking at that. And he's doing some amazing work there. He's changed a lot in his sort of, what would you call it, Renee? The way he presents himself, his brand. But I trust him a lot.
Yeah, I kind of respect that he was this triathlete known for that. And now he's over here talking about parenting and spirituality because his priorities have changed, his thoughts have changed. And so I appreciate that he's like, hey, I'm different now. And one really good example of that was his stance on psychedelics. He was like very pro psychedelics, very vocal about it. And then like overnight, he was like, look, this is changed for me. This is my new opinion. And a lot of people gave him crap for it. I don't necessarily agree with his change, but I respect that he was willing to say, I changed my opinion and this is why. I think that's good for people to do. Yeah.
100%. I mean, you see it all the time. The people evolve, they grow, they evolve, they learn new things, they have new thoughts. It's a really, I think it's a beautiful thing if someone, changes their mind and grows. It's just showing growth and evolution. And I have to say, I admit, I was someone who I went down the whole, I'm going to try this biohack and this biohack and this biohack. And I was like cowboy at one point. I was like, what am I doing? I was doing all the things and I didn't really know what I was doing. It was because I was so desperate to get better. I was like, I'm going to just try everything. And then basically that's when I pulled it back a few years ago. It was about 5 years ago now. I thought, okay, I've got to start actually reading the research and the studies because I was always the person where something oddly would go wrong. So I started being like, okay, I've got to be a little bit more careful here, have a level head with it. But that's personally what I've had to do. So it's been very interesting, my own journey.
Very similar.
Can relate.
Love to hear that.
What are some of the surprising things that you've learned about your own health through biohacking?
Maybe it's weird to think this now because I feel like everyone's talking about cycle syncing. But 10 years ago, I was like, if someone had talked to me about cycle syncing, I would have been like, what? Why? What? Because back then I fell into the Dave Asprey camp for a while. Like I read his book, I was doing the bulletproof coffee, I was fasting 16 hours a day, doing CrossFit 5 days a week, and didn't know why I was burned out for the second time. And man, if someone had just introduced cycle syncing to me back then, I would have been able to optimize myself faster. But yeah, it's like now it's saying like, oh, of course you're going to sync with your cycle. You're a different woman every day of the month. But I really didn't come across that work until maybe 5 years ago. And hopefully that's gaining popularity like I think it is.
I was the exact same. I hadn't heard of cycle syncing till about 5 years ago as well. And I work obviously in the women's health space, particularly PMDD. And I remember when I first heard cycle syncing, I was like, what are they talking about? I was like syncing my cycle to I thought it was rubbish. Like I just was like, I don't really resonate because I was so type A personality that I was like, no, I don't have to slow down. Like, what are you talking about? And what do you know though? Like I had to, because I had a very severe case of PMDD and I had to learn to actually work with my cycle and find, because I was one of those people, had the thoughts of go harder, keep going, keep pushing through. And I realized, oh my God, this is a detriment. Like this is actually causing more harm than good, and finding compassion and slowing down. And I would always see these free flowing, like, the girls with the flowing dresses, and they'd be like, frolicking in like the green field, and they'd be like, I'm cycle syncing. That's what I associated it with. So I was like, that is so not me. But as you said, when you learn about it, I started to realize, oh my gosh, I'm a woman. I was born, with a menstruation cycle. I have to learn to work with this. So I'm same thing here. It was a big learning curve for me to learn that. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
I think even beyond hormonal cycling, like if you look at nature, everything in nature cycles. So really when it comes to our health, we should be cycling almost everything. We should be cycling our exercise. We should be cycling the way that we consume supplements. We should be cycling our food, whether you're female or male, or cycling female or non-cycling. Like nature cycles. And so doing the exact same thing every single day just doesn't align with nature at all.
If I go back for those who are listening and they're actually like, what is cycle syncing? Renee, can you explain what cycle syncing is for the audience that might never have heard the term before?
Yeah. So it's just, looking at your cycle, the average female cycle is 28 days, and knowing that our hormones are fluctuating at different times of the month, and cycle syncing. So you're matching your diet, your exercise, hopefully your stress levels to some extent, and then your sleep optimization, your ability to fast, your ability to push it in at the gym, your need for more sleep, like all of that is going to change throughout the month. And so when you're not fighting against that cycle, everything is just a little bit easier.
Yeah. Particularly in the luteal phase, which is when most women have their struggles. The PMS, DD, poor sleep, more anxiety. We get sick. When you understand what the hormones are doing, then it kind of relieves this anxiety about the anxiety. It's like, oh, I'm feeling all these things and now I feel bad about myself. Like I'm bad. I feel guilty. I feel shame because I should be better than that. It's like, no, this is a time of rest and recovery and regeneration. And that was a big surprise for me, like understanding that when my hormones dropped off before I got my period, that my immune system would be very vulnerable. So for a long time, I was like, why am I always getting sick before my period? I'm like, well, if I'm pushing really hard and my hormones are low, of course my body's going to say like, screw you. Like if you're going to get sick, that's what is going to happen. And so it just is like such a wave of relief to understand that like, it's not me being bad or doing something wrong. This is nature and we can respect that. And everything just gets so much easier. You could still have symptoms, but it does. The symptoms do tend to resolve and dissolve the more that you can lean into that.
Completely agree with you. It was for me, like, as you said, that word relief. I was like, for me, it was a permission slip because I no longer thought, I was like, this makes sense why I can't go as hard. And it's okay to slow down the 7 days before you start your period. Like, big permission slip for me. So that word relief, I just felt my whole body go, because it was so accurate.
I love the permission slip because I think it also goes the other way because we can't look at cycle syncing as some definitive prescription because there are some women that, you tell them, oh, you can't be doing hard exercise right before your period. But if you feel amazing and you know your body, then trust that. Because I've had some clients that are like, but I really want to. And like, why should I follow this prescription? Because then again, it becomes a one size fits all. And that's not what we're trying to do. It's the permission slip to listen to your body. And that could be different for everybody.
Absolutely. That's where that intuition kicks in.
Yeah. Like, week one of your, like when you start your period, most women are like recommending, walking and yoga and like gentle stuff. I can't tell you how many PRs I've had on like day 2 of my cycle. It's like, I don't know what it is about day 2, but I go to the gym and I'm just like breaking every record. So most people would think like, why are you going to the gym on that day? But I feel ready to go. But the 5 days before, like Lauren, you mentioned the immune issue with those days. I can think of like 3 times I've gotten sick in the last like 6 years. All 3 times were 3 or 4 days before my period. Crazy. And I was pushing myself. I was traveling, pushing myself when I should have been taking it easy and boom. And then that's fun because then you get your period and you're sick and you're on vacation at the same time.
Your body's like, oh, you're not going to rest? I will make you rest.
Winning. The trifecta there.
What unique challenges then do women face when it comes to biohacking compared to men? Because we're obviously built different. So what challenges would we face as opposed to men?
So in general, our bodies are not as resilient to hormetic stressors. If you think about our ancestors, the men were out foraging and hunting, and they could go long periods of time without food, so more fasting. And women were typically at home and had more access to food and could rest. So in terms of hormesis, which should be like an acute positive stressor to produce a change or an adaptation to make us stronger, more resilient, just in general, like women have to be a little bit more careful about what that stress load is. So with cold plunging, we're not going to do a 20-minute cold plunge, probably not. With sauna, typically can't withstand as high of a temperature and for as long. With fasting, everyone's different, but in general, women aren't going to easily fast as long as men. So I think just like looking at that balance of positive stress, like eustress to distress, making sure that, again, it's right for your body. And there's always nuances within the female physiology, but in general, we got to be careful about how much stress.
It's interesting. So women can basically, as you said, they can do the same types of biohacking. It might just have to be in a different moderation. So as you said, I've noticed the heat thing for sure. Like with my husband, he can sit in a sauna and he's absolutely like happy as Larry. And I'm like, like I am dying by the time it's 20 minutes. I find heat really hard. Same with the cold. I have to be careful there too. But I always wondered, why am I so much more sensitive to the heat than he is? So what you just said, I'm like, that explains it. So do we just have to be a little bit more careful in moderation as to length, and potentially there might just be more sensitivity with women as opposed to men.
Yeah. And then, I mean, there's like a million different shades of gray and nuance here, because I would maybe challenge you to go, okay, it's good you're listening to your sort of like natural response to that. Like, I don't like this, or don't want to sit here this long. Is it your body really giving you signals like this is bad? Or is it your nervous system going like, this feels challenging? So is it an opportunity to sit in discomfort? Is there something else like emotionally going on that we have to look at? I mean, there's so many colors. So I think overall, it's just like, can we listen to the signals of the body, get quiet, and like let that intelligence speak? And if we allow for that, then we get more information. And sometimes that brings up more confusion. I understand it's not always going to be super clear. But yeah, I think that in general, it makes sense. Like, your husband as a male probably can tolerate more of it.
Oh, you're spot on. I definitely know. So I was used to be someone that if I didn't eat, like I went and did this 10-day meditation thing where I didn't eat much food once, the amount of like anguish and frustration and anger it brought up. And I was like, oh, there is something here, because I'm a raging lunatic because I'm starving. So I noticed it was the same with heat. I was like, okay, there's something happening beneath the surface with my mindset here, which is so funny because I was an elite gymnast. So I was someone who was so used to putting myself through extreme circumstances. So I don't know, as I aged, I went, oh, this is a little bit harder. So definitely agree with you on that. But with the emotional side of things, if a woman, like you said, you mentioned, try and listen, get yourself quiet. Someone obviously who's been through a fair bit of trauma or doesn't have a mind-body connection, what's like small things that they can do to start to get quiet and hear themselves? Because most people can't. It's very challenging for them.
Renee, jump in, but I would probably repeat the psychedelics thing, but try not to multitask, because multitasking is such a distraction. I would just try not to find distractions. Like, challenge yourself to not like do the quick thing. And people we distract ourselves in so many different ways. For some people, it's eating. For some people, it's exercising more. For some people, it's consuming alcohol. For some people, it's getting on our devices or watching TV. So I don't know that there's an easy answer to that. But I do think in a lot of ways, like if you're someone that can't sit still or quiet or meditate, sometimes psychedelics could be really helpful for that, because it will just force you to be like, you're going to sit here and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, I would ditto that. I think psychedelics are the great teacher here. And I experienced that firsthand with a mushroom journey. Lauren was witness to this. I was so uncomfortable and angry and sad. And after the journey, I realized it was just that the mushrooms were making me be still with myself. And I don't think I had ever experienced that. Like, I'm always the future planner, type A, distract myself. I used to use alcohol for that. I had an eating disorder for that. Like, I used these external things. And then so this was a bigger mushroom journey that was like, okay, sit down. Here we go. And it was like very eye-opening. And maybe some people wouldn't be ready for that, or you would need a guide. You should probably have a guide for that. The other end of the spectrum is I have played with microdosing LSD, and I've done that on work days. And I have found that multitasking feels icky. It's the best way I could describe it. I would like try to multitask and my body would be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop. And so I would just get back to doing one thing at a time. I should probably start doing this again, because when I did it, I was more productive. I would finish my day and be like, wow, that was a great day. I feel great. My mood's great. I got a lot done. I should learn how to do it without that. But yeah, so for any of you multitaskers, I think maybe experimenting with that could be helpful.
You mentioned, you just slipped that one in quietly there, eating disorder when you were, I'm assuming, younger, like some type of eating disorder that you had. And then you've got this chronic fatigue that you've mentioned. So how has microdosing given you any personal insight as to why the body might have developed or created or wasn't coping and ended up resulting in, an eating disorder and potentially chronic fatigue? Did you get any insights from that?
A little bit. So the background, my eating disorder started when I was 10. And I think it mostly stemmed from ballet class. Wearing a tight leotard and looking at your body in the mirror I think that's hard for any female, especially at that age. So that's when it started. And it was kind of an on and off battle for about 10 years, maybe more. And, people are always like, oh, how did you resolve that? And to be honest, I have to give almost all of the credit to my husband, because when we started dating, my eating disorder was still pretty present. And he just constantly was there, like, I love your body. You look amazing. You're beautiful. Like, just so supportive. And I don't know that this would work for everyone, but somehow that got deeper into my brain to love myself and to love my body. And then, a few years after that, I got more into nutrition. I went back, got my master's in nutrition and just the study of nutrition. And I was like, wow, food is not the devil. It's actually fuel for every cell in our body. So it was like the combination of this like love, external, internal love, and like viewing food as this amazing thing that energizes and feeds our body. So it was really the combination. Anyways, I don't think I answered your question about the psychedelics. I guess something that did come to me. So I went to Costa Rica for a week and I did Wachuma. And what really came up for me was this feeling of shame and guilt, like this shame and guilt complex. And so I think that it's possible that the eating disorder, the abuse of alcohol, some of that was from that. So working through that I'm not there yet. It's not the end of the journey, but it was definitely eye-opening.
Thank you so much for sharing that. No, that's beautiful. There's a lot of women that still to this day, like I just had a psychologist on who talks about eating disorders and the prevalence of them happening at younger ages now. It's definitely, and same thing, I experienced some very disordered eating with gymnastics as a kid. Same thing, because you had coaches and, all eyes were on you and you had to look a specific way. So I think it can be very influential for young girls. And then I've noticed the type A personalities, we tend to be really hard on ourselves. We tend to want to just do everything right and go harder. We usually have a lot more energy and we're very self-motivated and self-disciplined, but it can flip and come towards us, within ourselves and our thoughts. And I was, someone who was quite prone to the external influences of the world and magazines. My God, I was the person who had the Clio and the Dolly and was, looking at all the diets and all the things at the time as well. So you learn a lot as you get older, but it's a huge journey, absolute big journey of overcoming.
It's also a way to be in control. That is actually something else that I learned with psychedelics is when you're deep in a journey, you aren't in control. And I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with that. And I think in eating disorder or OCD, those are ways to be in control, like next level control.
I'll just make a comment about control because I do work with microdosing a lot of clients that have any hesitation or like, I don't know if that's right for me. Like, I have to have control. I'm like, exactly. Like that's such a great reason to do it, because if you struggle with that, a lot of people do. Like that is one expression of trying to control. And psychedelics will teach you, well, one, to like trust, which is huge, and that we can relax into that. Like there is a level of surrender. We still have to be radically self-responsible, but control to a certain extent is an illusion. And so people that are like, oh, I don't want to do that, I'll lose control. I'm like, it may actually be really helpful for you.
You came to the right place.
Yeah.
Completely agree. I was same thing, control freak just from a lot of trauma as a child. And it was just the idea of trusting. Like, I didn't trust myself. I was like, trusting, you want me to trust my body and my mind? Like, hell no, that is not going to happen. So that was a big journey for me in terms of understanding how to trust my nervous system, trust my mind, trust my body, trust myself, love myself. Like, psychedelics, I think, can have a really profound place for getting to know your higher self and your inner self. I think it can be really incredible. Any other specific techniques that are biohacking that might work better for men or for women, or no, that it's really across the board? It's just a matter of listening to yourself. There's nothing that would work better for a woman than a man.
Well, I would say like incorporating heart rate variability can be really helpful, just to kind of run with what Lauren was saying about like as females, we need to be more mindful of the hormetic stressors. So I think using HRV to determine that can be really helpful, because if you're not super in tune with your body, I think using some quantitative data to get started can be helpful. So like for me, like I now know what a really intense workout does to my HRV the next day. So I like can plan around that. I know what the sauna does. Cold plunge, it just like it wrecks me. I have not figured out how to do that. Maybe my adrenals are just not there yet. Fasting, all of the hormonic stressors, right? I think just looking at HRV, whether you just have heart rate, chest strap, heart rate monitor, an Oura Ring, BioStrap, Whoop, you name it, that can be really, really helpful for women. Because men, I do see they bounce back obviously faster.
Interesting. So I have a Apple Watch. That's where I measure my HRV. For those, I guess, who are listening and don't know what we're talking about either, it's basically it just measures your heart rate variability, like the beats per
variation between each heart
variation. With women, are you saying some women might not necessarily bounce back as quick as men? Is that what you were just mentioning? That's the case sometimes?
That's what I've seen in data.
Wow.
Yeah. So like you take the same stressor for a man and woman, and you could see less of a rebound in the HRV the next day. The other thing is during the luteal phase, our HRV tends to be lower anyways. So you're really going to see it tank. Like I do a hard workout, like we were talking about that last week of my cycle, my HRV is just like done. Versus like week 1 or week 2 of my cycle, I'm like, yeah, I can hit it hard. And my HRV is like, oh, we're going to go down by 10 points instead of 50.
I've got to ask them, what are both of your HRV sitting at? Something I've been trying to work up in an upward trend, but it sometimes goes in a downward trend. But what does your HRV, average typically sit at?
Well, the thing about HRV is that you can't compare. There's no normative baseline. It really just depends on your own variation because in general, we think higher is better, but that's so relative to the person because so mine sits around, my average is like 105. Renee's is freakishly high at 130. I know, but
50.
like we tell people that and there's jaws that drop. But if you were to ask each of us how resilient we feel from day to day, I don't know that either of us would ever tell you that we feel like superheroes. But according to that number, you would think like, oh my gosh, you're so resilient. You can withstand anything. It's so personal to us. And I don't know that we have enough research to understand why one person has a particular baseline. In general, for you, we want to see like if we can raise the ceiling on that. But just because mine sits at 105 and maybe the average is 40 or 30 doesn't mean that I'm more resilient. I'm more resilient if I have variability within my variability. So I want to be able to move my HRV up and down. And if it does drop, I don't want it to stay down there. That's not resilience. So we can't compare. In general, higher is better for you. But hopefully that wasn't more confusing. It's a tricky one.
What are the things that both of you do to boost it? What are the things that you actively and mindfully do to try and make sure your HRV is having a nice variability and sits, high for your body?
So I just wanted to jump in. I wish I had tested HRV when I went through burnout and I wasn't listening to my body, because my answer is I listen to my body now. I don't do the things that kind of push against what I intuitively know is right for me. Where in the past, it's like I was tired, run down, I'm going to show up to that workout anyways. I don't know it. Who knows? My HRV probably really sucked then. But now I think I keep it higher because I'm just constantly leading into my hormones and honoring my intuition and prioritizing recovery. And sure, I've learned like little nuances specific to me. I guess just one thing in particular, like PEMF has really boosted my HRV and it's maintained. So that's one thing that I will not go without. But I think it's so personal, and listening to the body is like the number one way to create more resilience, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Where do I begin? A couple of things about this. One, yes, you can't compare to other people. Like my average HRV is 145. Like Lauren said, I don't feel resilient all the time. My husband, his HRV is like 20, and he's like, he doesn't have any health problems. He like rarely gets sick. He can have a night of poor sleep and feel fine. So like, I feel like he's resilient. So again, you can't compare. For yourself, a really good measurement to look at is when you see 20% higher or 40% higher or 20% lower or 40% lower, what is happening in those ranges? And you want to really take note of that. So the 20-40 rule is really helpful because that's looking at your personal number, right? Obviously 20% of 45 for you is going to be different than for me. So that's good. And then I think similar to what Lauren said is not working out when I'm not recovered is huge. So for me on Sunday, I kind of sit down and I look at my schedule for the week and I'm like, okay, I think this will be my workout schedule, I think, but I don't actually like implement whatever I'm going to do until I wake up each morning and see what my HRV and sleep score are. So I'm like, okay, I wake up and it's like, whoo, it's good. I'm like, all right, I'm going to Orange Theory today. It's a good day for high intensity interval training. Or the next day it's down. Like, looks like I'm doing a walk and some yoga today. So I'm willing to change my potential schedule based off of that. And so listening to that and honoring that has been huge for my HRV. Ditto with the PEMF. Brain tap. I'm going to plug that again. That's been great for me.
I'm going to jump in. PEMF. Can you explain to everyone what that is?
Yeah. Pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. I was going to say frequencies. Field.
What does it look like? What does it do? Is it a device? What is it?
It's a device. There's all different devices now versus like what our dad had 25, 30 years ago at home. It looks very different. Now you can buy it for a couple $100 and there's different ones. There's like smaller ones that you can sit on or apply to certain areas of your body. You can also get like a full body length mat to lay on. I have one of those, which is great. There's also something called the AMP coil, which again, you're kind of just putting on your body. It's a small circular device.
That's my favorite.
If you're not familiar with PEMF, definitely look into that.
I haven't used it. That's why I want to try. I've heard of it, but I've never actually personally used it. So it's something that, Lauren, when you mentioned it, and you're like, it's your favorite kind of go-to thing. I was like, ooh, might have to look into that one now.
Yeah, I would say, I think most people can benefit from PEMF, but the clients or people that I see really benefit if you struggle with anxiety, if you struggle with sleep, if you live in an urban environment and you're exposed to a lot of EMFs. So that would be like non-native frequencies that are harmful to our cells in our body. So that PEMF essentially harmonizes our cells to be resonant, like the optimal resonance as nature intended. So again, I think everyone can benefit, and the different devices a lot of them are mats. The AMP coil, as Renee mentioned, is a coil. And what I like about the AMP coil is that there's a diagnostic feature, and we'll read the frequencies in your voice and can pick up on particular potential issues. We don't take it as fact always, but sometimes it can be like, oh, I'm kind of feeling this. And you do the diagnostic, and you're like, whoa, how could they possibly know that? And then, you can select certain journeys that are specific to that, whether it be like a down regulating frequency or something specific for sleep. It even does cleansing for particular like infections or viruses. There's immune support. There's like all kinds of fun stuff on there. So there's so much we can do with technology. It's pretty cool.
If someone's like, so they're going back to again, they're totally new to biohacking and they just heard this for the first time and they're thinking, I'm kind of interested. What would you say to someone who's just starting out or has just heard this? What are the personal benefits that you've both found for yourself in incorporating biohacking? Why would someone do it? The women listening to this, what would make them want to learn how to use biohacking techniques?
You're going to feel better than you already do. Or maybe if you feel fine, you will raise the ceiling on that. So I think like a piece of advice we always say, if you're just starting out, we love to encourage people to choose at least one piece of, one wearable, something that will identify blind spots through data. Like,
what are your favorites then? So we've got brain tap. Like, what other wearables are you mentioning? So
the Oura Ring, which is tracking sleep and recovery. So something that's giving you feedback on your personal body, which, we all have our blind spots and we kind of create our own new normal all the time. And so we could have a symptom that we think is totally normal, but it's not. And we just have gotten used to living with it. Or something like sleep where, you're asleep. Are you really aware of how much deep sleep you're getting? Some people wake up not rested and that's a clear sign, but some people self-medicate with alcohol or THC before bed. And we need to see like what's actually happening in your sleep architecture and sleep staging. And if you want to feel better, identifying those things can be really helpful. Information, I think, is always helpful. So that's a good like entry point, just to collect data that is beyond your like subjective perception.
Yeah, I think awareness is huge. I forget who we were talking to, a fellow female biohacker. She was like, you won't ever drink alcohol the same again after tracking your data. Nope. You can't unsee the horrific sleep and HRV data.
You are so spot on. I don't drink anymore. So I actually stopped drinking just more so because I get like histamine from alcohol. I don't do well with it. My husband, on the other hand, though, started tracking his HRV, his sleep, monitoring it. And he was having horrific sleeps at nighttime. Like we're talking like 20 minutes deep sleep a night with alcohol. He basically about, I'd say 8 months ago, stopped drinking alcohol. He maybe has one drink every 2 to 3 weeks now. That's it. Because he actually saw, when you had the data in front of you showing what it was actually doing to your body, it was like the light bulb went off for him. It wasn't until he had that data right in front of his face that he went, oh, okay, it's really actually having an impact on how I sleep. It was just immediately, it was overnight, he stopped drinking as much. Not that he was a big drinker, but just stopped having several, a couple of beers a week to literally one every 2, 3, maybe even once a month now because of that data. So it was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, I think
incredible.
a lot of people that drink, and I'm not sober, so like I do consume alcohol, but people that don't want to look at that, I think are really in a little bit of denial. And like, that's your prerogative if you want to drink. But I think, as Renee said, you can't unsee that. And I've looked at hundreds of client sleep data, and I've only found one person that alcohol actually increased deep sleep. For everyone else, it tanks it. But this particular person, her deep sleep went up, but her HRV went down, and other sleep stats were not good. So it's like, okay, when we look even closer, it's like, oh, this is still not a positive. So
Not a free pass.
do what you want with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
wearables. So you've got your Aura Ring, your Whoop. I will use an Apple Watch. So you recommend at least everyone has one type of wearable that they're tracking. What next?
Yeah, for a period
Yeah.
of time, maybe not forever. I don't think we should be attached to these things forever, but at least to highlight the blind spots, get the information, make the changes, and then perhaps move on.
Yeah.
Or keep it. We've had these for 6 years, and I don't check mine that often anymore, but I wear it all the time.
I check mine every day because I'm always testing different things and want to see what's going on. And it changes how I approach my day. So for me, I'm like, give me the data. But like my husband, he stopped wearing his ring because he's like, I already know what's going to happen if I have alcohol or I don't sleep. He's like, I already know. I don't need to see it anymore. So he stopped wearing it. He's not, a biohacker like us. But yeah, so I think just awareness, some kind of wearable so you can see what's working, what's not working. And then if you're just getting started, like, why would you want to biohack? I mean, that's just kind of what you were asking. And if you have a health issue that's unresolved and your doctor has said your labs are normal, there's nothing wrong with you, I think biohacking can be a great entrance for you to explore different options. Also realizing that we're all bio-individual, and biohacking really, really focuses on that we're all different. Like Lauren and I are sisters 2 years apart, and we still have to biohack differently in ways. So I think just really the bio-individual approach is really important. And then also maybe you feel amazing. You have no health problems. You're good to go, but we can look at increasing health span. So the longevity space is huge. I think we can do a lot here. And so if anyone's not familiar with the term health span, that's the number of years that you are alive and healthy versus the lifespan is the years you're just alive. And so the goal, obviously, is to get your health span to equal your lifespan or get it as close as possible, maybe a couple days in between. But, here in America, gosh, I mean, people, I think the last 5 or 10 years of their lives, they're not living. They're alive, but they're not healthy. They're bedridden, they're miserable, they're in pain, they're on medications. Like to me, that's not living. I want to be exercising and going to the bathroom by myself, talking to my friends and family till my last day. So anyways, that was a tangent about health span, but I think, preventing things. So if you feel great today, why not extend that for as long as you can? And you can do that through biohacking.
I'm glad that you brought up health span. I have a question for you on this biological age. You see a lot of the biohackers, everyone's testing their biological age. So I'm like, oh, I'm 20 years younger. What are your thoughts on testing your biological age and having that number and seeing if it's lower or higher?
Yeah, this is a funny conversation. Renee can speak to this more clearly, but none of the tests seem to agree at this point. So I think we still need to make some progress in terms of testing. Like Renee, one of the tests said she was 13,
I think 15.
15, and then one of them said that she was older than she is, and I've had some variation in mine too. So yeah, I think we're learning a lot, but the tests are, at this point, we're all just choosing the test that gives us the best result. I opinion.
Yeah. I think, the problem is there's no, algorithm across the board. I would say if you are interested in testing this, pick one test and retest with that company to really see what's happening over time. And I think if you're going to pick one, True Diagnostic, I do think is a pretty good one because it's looking at epigenetic methylation. The other one is glycan age. So it's actually looking at the inflammation inside the immune cells. You're going to get different results from those two. I'll tell you that. So pick one, whatever resonates more with you, and stick with that. And you can retest every 6 months. The one thing I do think is really valuable through True Diagnostic, and you can order just this part of the test if you're trying to save money, is the Dunedin pace of aging. So if we're aging at the normal chronological biological clocks, we're at a 1, right? For every calendar year, you age 1 biological year. The goal is to get your biological clock running slower, right? So that's a really cool test. And that's going to be it'll go from 0.6 all the way up to, I think, 1.2 or 1.3. So that tells you what you are doing right now in your lifestyle. Is it aging you faster than you're supposed to be, or is it slowing your aging? I think that's way more informative than just a biological age, because your biological age, actually, your results could change by a week. They found if you had a cold or flu or COVID and you did the test, you could be 20 years older, versus when you heal from that and you retest, it's like totally different. So that can change really fast versus the pace of aging. That was a really long tangent of that. I think that is priceless information.
No, I'm glad you shared that.
Or even if you just exercise, which we know acutely creates inflammation. If you're testing like right after you exercise, you're going to look inflamed, and that's not great. So there's a lot of variables there.
I tried True Diagnostic, but I didn't do the pace of aging. So mine came back and I had a freak out because it showed that my biological age was the same that I am now. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to die early because all these people are 10 years younger with their biological age test. Like I had a freak out. I thought I was like headed into doom and gloom because you see all these other biohackers that are getting these amazing results. And I thought, I am so sick. Like this, my body's not working. I really beat myself up over it. So that's why I wanted to bring it up. I'm really glad, but I hadn't tested for the pace or the rate in which you were aging. It had just given me the biological age. So that's really interesting. I hadn't heard that before.
Do that. It's like a couple $100 to just do the pace of aging. I would definitely do that.
Before we wrap up, what does your routines both look like then? How do you both live your life? What does a week, what does a standard week look like in each of your lives when it comes to biohacking?
How much time do you have?
I feel like I have no regularity at all because I travel way too much, something I'm trying to turn down a little bit. But no matter where I am, I maintain my sleep routine. I really try not to let travel disrupt that. So I always wake up at the same time, and bedtime will shift like just a little bit. But for the most part, I'm not one of those people that will, for example, if I'm traveling, I'm not going to wake up at 5 a.m. to go get a flight. Like I'm going to sleep till my normal time and get up and go. I may waste a whole day traveling because I do not want to disrupt my sleep routine. I know that's not ideal for everyone, but that really keeps me in check because travel can be so hard on the body for so many reasons. Travel, you're exposed to a lot of things. Airplanes are high like EMF, very oxidative. And so that helps me not like lose it when I'm traveling. I make sure always that I get adequate sunshine and movement in my day. And it's kind of a different way of doing it every day. But if I want to sleep, I know my body has to get adequate light and activity, and that helps me sleep. And then if I sleep, everything works better. So a lot of my routine really just revolves on preserving my sleep routine.
Do you use a sad lamp for when it's really dark in winter over there? And in Australia, obviously, we have the light comes up a little bit earlier, but still it's 6 o'clock in the morning in winter here, it's dark. And I have to use a sad lamp because I don't do so well in the winter months. So, and obviously the sun's not up. So is it something like using a sad lamp, like those sorts of things to put yourself in front of to get that sunlight in your eyes when it's winter?
I don't wake up before the sun comes up. And I've created a lifestyle and a schedule where I don't have to do that. But Renee and I each have this device called the human charger. It's like it looks like headphones. It goes into your ears. It shines bright light into your ears, which goes into your brain. So it kind of mimics like the signal of light to your brain. I'm a huge advocate for sad lamps, but I also just try to get outside. But I don't struggle with the darkness because I've just worked really hard to create a life where I don't have to wake up in darkness. And I really feel for people that do.
Well, I
like sad lamps.
I said to him, the birds aren't awake when it's dark. And I know everyone's like, this makes no sense. Like I wake up early and I'm like, yeah, but if you look outside in winter, the birds are not chirping when it's dark. The birds are chirping when the sun comes up. For me, it logically makes sense to get up with the sun. Unfortunately, I'm not at that place. I have so much work that I've got to get up earlier some mornings. But if you could have that, it feels more normal and natural to just actually wake up with the sun because it mimics actually what nature's doing. And that for me was just so logical.
Yeah, I must be a bird. But yeah, I don't know, clients that struggle with that, I always recommend the human charger, or yes, I like a sad lamp. I think red light too, which mimics the colors that we get at sunrise and sunset, can be really helpful. And then always just, no matter where you are, if you can step outside, because even if it's dark, there is still sun there. So you are getting exposure in some way. It's, to finish that, I think consistency is the most important. Your circadian rhythm likes consistency, so you just don't want to popcorn and change too much from day to day. So if you're someone that has to wake up early, it really is better to, like, every day of the week wake up at that time rather than to try to shift, because then you just throw off. You have clocks all over your body, all over your organs. So consistency is the most important.
You've mentioned both of you sleep quite a few times. So would you say, if you had to pick one, Lauren, we'll start with you, biohack, and everyone, so you can't do anything else, what's the one? It sounds like sleep for you is going to be the thing that you would pick over everything.
Oh yeah,
1000%.
Renee's the sleep queen, but like all good things happen when you sleep. So you can do actually a lot less biohacking if you just optimize your sleep, I think.
Yeah.
Same with me, Renee, would be sleep.
It detoxes your brain, so you're supporting brain function. It reboots your immune system. It supports hormones. It supports metabolic health. So the next day you can maybe eat some more carbs and not freak out about it. It supports your mood, so you're nicer to everyone around you. It increases your resilience. It gives you more energy, so now you can go to the gym and work out harder. I mean, it's just endless. And think about it, you're sleeping 1/3 of your life. So if you only biohack that 1/3 of your life, think about the benefits you're going to get.
Is there anything that we haven't covered today that either of you want to share or talk about or wrap up that has to do with biohacking for women in particular?
There's so much. It's so endless.
Keep going.
Well, not to tangent or rabbit hole, but I just think something we didn't cover today is environmental toxicity, something that's hugely overlooked. With just biohacking and health in general, we're so focused on, like, what kind of activity, how much activity, what kind of food, how much food, but we have to look at the air that we're breathing, the water that we're drinking, the products we're putting on our skin, the things that we're breathing in our environment. And it's really such a root driver of illness these days. And so we could be like doing all the things right, but like missing a lot. And just a random example, because I was talking to a fellow practitioner today who discovered that her client, she was joking that she was allergic to her husband. And then they dug a little bit more, and the practitioner found out that her husband was a roofer. And so he was coming home with like all these chemicals and toxins on his clothing. So she literally was allergic to him because he was bringing toxicity into her like field. And, we don't think about those things, And so if you like done all the things right in terms of nutrition and exercise, look at your environment, look at the chemicals, and like keep researching and learning about things that we could be exposed to. It's huge.
If you can break it down, then what does that look like in terms of, you mentioned air, food, I'm guessing you're even mentioning like some clothing, perfume that you wear. So if you can break it down into the categories just for the listeners, what that would look like in each category, where they should be more mindful.
Yeah. Well, as a resource, I would say look at EWG, environmentalworkinggroup.org. They categorize, they have a whole water database, but essentially tap water can come with a whole host of chemicals like fluoride, chlorine, heavy metals, things like lead, arsenic, which are very toxic to the body, especially to the brain. They do a whole beauty care line. So anything that you're putting on your skin, like you think about your skin absorbing, it's an organ. And most beauty care is just like, look at the ingredient list. It's like a million ingredients you can't read. Same as food. We probably shouldn't be putting it on our skin because it's the same as eating something, pretty much. Household products, so cleaning products. I think we've become very germ and bacteriophobic. So we're always trying to kill things with bleach, where really like vinegar and essential oils go a long way. But EWG goes through all of those things. So just to save some time, just know like the food industry, the beauty care industry is not really concerned so much about your health. They're concerned with selling products. So just use some discretion there and default to EWG to kind of screen and filter and figure out what would be a cleaner option.
There's women all over the world that listen to this podcast. So I want to make sure that they know where they can go look to basically start if they want to start eliminating, I know even like plastic in the kitchen and putting in the dishwasher. There's like research coming out with that now. So, and I know that this can also be very overwhelming. Like a lot of women will be like, this is so much information and it's so overwhelming. So just doing, like, as you said, one tiny thing bit by bit by bit and introducing more. Like, don't try and overwhelm yourself, but just if they have a starting point to know where they can look, just to start doing their own research and figuring out what does it look like to have toxins in my environment, I think is a first step for some people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think just to not overwhelm, just try to start slowly swapping out things that have less ingredients and more recognizable ingredients. And then plastic is just such a big issue. So at the very least, just stop drinking out of plastic water bottles. Like if you make that change alone, that'll be a lot. And there's a lot more coming out on clothing. And I've had conversations, my friends are like, don't tell me that my clothes are toxic. I'm not ready for that. And like, fair. That's really fair to tell someone they have to swap out their entire wardrobe. I'm not there either. The more cotton you can buy, 100% organic, there's a certification. I actually don't know how to pronounce this. It's OEKTEX. It's starting to explode. I would just say, like, try to stop drinking out of plastic. If you can do that, that's a good first step.
Yeah.
Thank you.
2 other names that just came up in my head. If you can get them for wherever people are in the world, Anne Marie Gianni, her skincare is really clean. It, like, you could eat it out of the jar, like put it on your face and then just eat it. And then Ali Tora is another really good one.
Thank you so much for your time today, both of you. I've actually learned, like, I would have assumed the biggest thing, you know, Renee, you actually said something, and then Lauren, you said something about the mental health, but Renee, you said something about your routine, like when you exercise, will actually be per day. Like you look at where your HIV is, are you recovered? I wouldn't have assumed people that are biohackers to that extent. I thought there would have been such a level of discipline as to what day. So to even hear that is something I'm going to change, because I'm very structured with when I exercise. But as you said, some mornings I wake up and I'm like, I'm exhausted, but I push and go to the gym and do weights. And then I find that I have a harder time recovering the rest of the day. So that for me was a really big aha moment of, wait a minute, I might have to restructure my day to day with how I'm recovering. And that might look different week to week, not necessarily every day on a Tuesday I go no matter what. So that was a big key thing for me. And the mental health thing from you, Lauren, like just understanding even the microdosing side of things. I'm not someone who's done much microdosing before, but the impact that can also have on your emotional side of things. You can do all the biohacking, you can do all the things, but if you're not looking after the emotional side, it's like a key and lock, and they seem to come very much in hand. So thank you so much for your time today. You're both extremely informative. Your podcast is amazing. All the information that you do, you have a really balanced perspective with it, and you're living and breathing it. And you both have the vulnerability also to admit when there's areas for improvement, like chronic pain, fatigue, and things that you're still working through, which shows that we're all human and we're doing the best that we can. But by implementing biohacking, might just be able to make it that little bit better. So thank you so much for your time. It's been very much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having us. You're a wonderful host.
This has been so fun. You're a wonderful host, and we love chatting about health more than anything else. So thank you for the opportunity.